The college basketball season is over. Congrats to the Florida Gators, but that means the draft season is just really revving up. And we want to talk about the upside of Kon Knueppel and Khaman Maluach, and a quick check-in on Cooper Flagg, of course. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. You can call me Chuck. This is episode, I believe, number 224. 223 would have been a redraft of the 2024 draft in doubles format with Trill of the Ball Patreon and podcast. Doubles format means he took two players, then I took two players, and so forth, to try to illustrate how flat that draft has been and sort of parse all of the different role players, since it's known as a role player draft, and which ones sort of have the most intrigue and the most value throughout the league. So a fun redraft episode. Shout out to Zach Edey, who I think should win Rookie of the Year, and hopefully he does. But we're back to the 2025 cycle, a cycle lots of people are excited about. Brian Geisinger is back on this podcast, ACC extraordinaire. Has contributed in lots of different places, but right now his Substack is probably, I would say, probably where you write the most frequently, Brian. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, definitely. Really enjoyed that was a new addition this season
Yeah.
and really had a lot of fun writing stuff there. And it's all free. No ads on the site. And people like sort of like, deep basketball analysis, film stats, all that good stuff. We're doing it there. So
And he
uh
is at bgeisinger.bsky.social. That is
mhm.
his forum of preference. Who could blame him, obviously, since he was bgeis_bird on Twitter. Where do birds belong but in the blue sky? So what is the address for your Substack, by the way, if people
Yeah.
want to just type it in?
So real quickly, that is just my name, Brian Geisinger .substack.com. The title of it is called Split the Action, but the
Split the
actual
action.
actual address is briangeisinger.substack.com. I've got one thing planned for later this week. We're going to be doing a little breakdown on Paul McNeil Jr. coming back for his
Oh, that's
sophomore
right.
season at NC State to play for Will Wade, which is kind of like a kind of flew under the radar, at least I feel like outside of the triangle, in terms of interesting upside bet for a year two, maybe a breakout guy in the ACC. So,
Hmm.
going to go through some Paul McNeil film and stats as and sort of projecting him into the next Cam Thomas under Will Wade role that we've got cooking here in Raleigh now.
Yeah, and you are an ACC expert first and foremost. You've previously been credentialed, I think, from a couple different outlets
Mhm.
to Cameron Indoor and these various venues in the ACC, and you were on in December to talk about sort of the early returns and impressions on Cooper Flagg. And we recorded that when Flagg had really strung together a couple of subpar like scoring efficiency games. I think his true
Mhm.
shooting was around 50 at the time we recorded. Then literally, I think from that point on for the next 60 days, he was, essentially 2002 LeBron as a prospect. So, you know, part of my trepidation in that podcast maybe hasn't aged the best, but we can do a little bit check in to see where he is since he
Mhm.
finished around, 60 true shooting. It was the nation's best player. The design of the episode today, though, is to talk about the teammates that we only touched on in the latter part of that episode, which is Kon Knueppel and Khaman Maluach. Now, obviously, less than a week ago, Duke loses that heartbreaking Final Four game to Houston, which I was in the house for and got to watch, but I left early because I'm washed. But that's okay. I knew that going in. But Flag, we'll just touch on Flag quickly
Mhm.
just to get it out of the way in case anyone wants to know where we stand on him or where you stand on him. Is there anything you saw post ankle injury in the ACC tournament from him coming back off of that ankle, really in the NCAA tournament? Anything you saw that really stuck out to you that clarified anything that maybe was still uncertain in your mind about his game, or just any sort of notable development in the tourney that you saw from the number one pick?
Not really. I mean, like I was pretty. I'm guessing most people who have evaluated Cooper, even before the injury to Georgia Tech, I felt pretty clear about where I stood with him. It's just like easily, it's just an unbelievable prospect and a guy that, for a variety of reasons, I see projecting very well into like a star role in the NBA, a guy that can be a top, one or two guy for playoff teams consistently, an engine of offense, a great two-way player. Um, I guess the only thing I would sort of say was that like I thought, and he played 4 games in the tournament. The Arizona game, he wasn't like great, wasn't like his best game, but he was pretty awesome in the others. I
Hmm.
think continuing to see him like make progression with the handle, certainly always good. Like a thing to, I think, constantly monitor with Cooper, and just getting to see him do that against some tougher defenses. Like he played great against Houston, as did Kon Knueppel, who we'll talk about in a second here. So, um, no, I think as far as Cooper goes, like I felt like I've been at the same place on him for a while. Like I'm bought in, I'm sold. Like I think he's unbelievable. If there was any sort of like on-court tangible thing, it would be the handle. And then I was sort of saying this to you beforehand, like if we're I'm jumping the gun here by a lot, but like if we're writing chapters 2 and 3 right now of the Cooper Flagg biography, potentially like a all-star player going forward here. Um, it was cool to see him make the Final Four. Like it was cool to see him have some signature tournament moments. Um, to see him sort of like cross some of these thresholds and achieve some of these benchmarks at these like very early stages was cool. But no, at this point, I've seen all I needed to see. Like he's one of the best prospects I've ever evaluated. One of the best guys I've ever covered, and seeing him close up this season at Cameron was the only sort of like guy I could compare it to in terms of like how he could like light Cameron on fire was Zion. Like just that him in the open floor, like the dunk he had against Pittsburgh against Guillermo Diaz Graham. Like the woman who I was sitting to next on press row when that happened, the two of us, when Cooper got to like mid court and towards the 3-point line, the two of us were like grabbing each other, just being like, "Oh my God, here it comes!" And so it was a pleasure covering him, and yeah, at this point, I'm just fascinated to see what happens the lottery night. Like that to me is sort of like the next big thing for him. Who gets the number one pick, and then go from there.
Yeah, I mean that certainly is, I'm sure, what he's looking forward to. Although he's not really experienced a lot of losing in his life, so I'm sure he's still stewing a little bit about that game
Did
on
you see the
Saturday
Did
night.
you see the video of him? He was at the driving range
No,
this
what
week
was it?
after he was blowing off some steam. It looked like maybe won't surprise you. Cooper Flack has a textbook golf swing too. The guy seems like he's just good at a lot of stuff
Sure.
athletically. So yeah, I will say we probably touched on this a little bit when we talked about Flag, but like if I could add one more thing, is that like whatever team he goes to, I think he's going to transform them. I think they're good. Like that franchise will become like molded into his personality, super competitive, super good teammate. Guys love playing with him. So unselfish, good defender. Just wants to kind of like make the right plays, but knows when to take over. Um, and I just think whatever team gets him, it is a franchise defining and altering moment. Like I do sort of feel that way about him. And for me, it's someone like who covers the Hornets. It would be something that it would be just an asteroid landing in Charlotte,
Hmm.
if they were to actually get the number one pick. So, yeah, again, lottery night really does seem like sort of like the next. He's going to declare for the draft, and so once that happens, then it just becomes lottery night.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that, obviously, but I think that this Duke team took on his personality as well. I think it's a team that really prided itself on
Mhm.
unselfishness. We're going to get into that with Knippel because it's a very interesting part of his game, but sort of selfishness, taking pride in your effort, taking pride in your teammates' effort, all those sort of isms that coaches like to stress. And it looked like Cooper was a pleasure to coach. You mentioned that you thought it was a nice chapter that he got to be in the Final Four. And before we recorded, you said, it would have been even cooler to see them play Florida.
Mhm.
I agree. I thought Duke versus Florida would have been really the like sort of the marquee matchup. Not that Houston, Florida wasn't, but Houston's a Kelvin Sampson team
Mhm.
that maybe has some future pros, but not a lot of NBA talent on it.
Yeah,
Whereas
yeah.
Duke has that added layer. But
Mhm.
what was nice was that the game that Duke lost was like it was lost in such dramatic fashion, and you got to see how they operated in a really close game, which had not really happened. Certainly not had not happened in the NCAA tournament. They had that game against UNC in the conference tournament where they got tight. Cooper
Mhm.
didn't play in that game, but I watched that game back in preparing for this episode, and it was instructive to see some tendencies sort of repeat themselves in
I
that
thought
game and in the Houston game.
I think actually I even think in the kind of like in the Arizona game, they just took the I think they took the air out of the ball like a little too early. Um and I get it. It's like they've got a great half court offense, they've got a great system, but like it's not like they went into like prevent ball, but I kind of felt like they lost like a little bit of their flow offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And in a team like Houston that's just like razor sharp defensively, like they pounced on it. And I thought more specifically, like I think like Tyrese Proctor got tight. I think Sion James got tight.
Mm-hmm.
Who he's been mostly unflappable all season. Um, and yeah, it was just unfortunate because those guys have been studs for them. And I just thought, they got those two specifically were like not themselves the final 2 minutes of that game.
Well, and I think a lot of Houston's game plan is always to be very physical with the opposing team's guards. That's
Mhm.
one of the areas where they pride themselves so much. And I think that Proctor, and to a lesser extent James, felt that a
Yeah.
lot. But I mean, the game, when we look back on it historically, and I mean far in the future, when things like Khaman Maluach's student visa getting revoked are
I,
but a distant memory.
what an insane thing.
Exactly.
I
Like
can't believe
we
he had to deal with that. It's
has to
ridiculous.
continue to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's still
Yeah.
like it's a
Yeah, it's
reality.
ongoing.
He's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and so like, and I'm not using that to take anything away from Houston. I just mean that when the dust can finally settle on that game, like yeah, Houston was able to get them out of their normal element. Certainly, Maluach didn't have a rebound the whole game, and
Hmm.
this'll I want to mention this during the Maluach portion of this episode, but like they were physical with Maluach that in a way that I think drove home Maluach's current level of physicality, and I
Hmm.
think his current level of physicality and aggression is not where it should be or where it will be,
Yep.
in 5 to 10 years when he's in his prime. But
Yep.
um I think as far as Flagg goes in that game, I thought he was very, very good. And I thought in particular, watching him live, I thought his handle looked good in that game. Especially for the quality of defense that he was playing. I think late, the game slows down when it's tight, especially in tournament play. And since they were so committed to having Flagg initiate, especially with the way that Proctor was playing,
Yeah.
which was not great, if Flagg is going to initiate in a slow half court game, that's exactly what you would want him doing
Hmm.
as a defense. He loves playing in that sort of flow state in sort of a hybrid initiator connector kind of role where he's getting on and off the ball very
Hmm.
quickly and the action is all very crisp. That if you take away that rhythm, then the stuff that we talked about in our last episode that not was like truly concerning, but we're just sort of notes about him. I think you said that it's weird that arguably the weakest parts of his game are like one-on-one offense, one-on-one defense. That
Hmm.
is where he has sort of the most growth to do. And I think since that episode, he has grown, particularly on offense in those
I
situations.
I would agree. I think there's still like stuff to pick out with the defense
Right.
that is like correctable, like fixable, but yeah, like it's worth noting. I thought there were some issues he had defensively. Um there were even like, at the end of the season there were a lot of like Duke fans mad that Cooper was not ACC defensive player of the year, and I get that. Like he was an awesome defensive player. Um I mean, I think Malik Brown is the best defender on that team and the best defender. Like me, I get it. He played like 400 minutes this year, so he wasn't going to win the award. But uh, Malik Brown is just an amazing defender, and honestly, probably someone who probably should have played a few more minutes against Houston. Maybe he was a little fatigued or tired, but I thought he was awesome in that game too, and they could have used him a little bit more. Yeah, like the Cooper's role offensively this season was something that was really interesting to monitor. They used him in a way, and I think I said this last time I was on, like they really did use him in a way that is similar to how like the Celtics orient offense around Jason Tatum, which is
Hmm.
that it was a lot of five out, not like exclusively, but it was a lot of five out. But instead of having the center initiate the action and get into the handoffs in the middle of the court, Duke does some of that, especially with Pat Gongba or Malik Brown. Um, but often they have the center space to the wing, what they call tunnel spacing. And they've got Cooper operating in the middle of the floor. And they've got everything opened. And Cooper's the one making decisions and making reads. And, the sets are going to start with Proctor Knueppel coming off of a down screen and then Duke flowing into different stuff. Again, it looks very similar to what the Celtics do with Tatum and Horford and Brown, or Tatum, Porzingis, and Brown. Like it just has a very similar spacing template and like pacing to it. And the actions are similar in a lot of ways too. So, and Cooper was awesome at it. Like he was so good in that role, and his decision making this season was just was special. He makes decisions quickly. He makes them on the move. He is an amazingly accurate passer. Like
Hmm.
he's just routinely putting the ball in the shooting pocket, cross court skips, post skips, live ball, pick and roll stuff. Um, yeah, really special offensive talent. Um, Defensively, I still think like he ball watches a little bit. I think he has a tendency to overplay off the ball a little bit and kind of like lose his man and then not close out as well as you might like, because like guys can beat him off the dribble, when it's
Yes,
like
they can.
when it's a catch and go. And even sort of if if he has the ball and his man in front of him, like you can still sort of like tilt him, with put a combo dribble together and kind of like
Yeah.
slip by him. He's not like the stickiest one-on-one defender. Though he can do it, and I think he's going to be like a good on-ball defender in the NBA too. Uh, but obviously, like, the stuff he does best is the team defense, the backline help, and I think he proved to be pretty good at doing that this season, especially when Duke would mix up its coverages and either play Maluach at the level or hedge with Maluach. I actually thought Duke's defense against Houston kind of looked its best when they would like blitz the ball screen and have either Brown or Maluach. They would put two on the ball against Uzan and then have James and Cooper sort of like flying around backside. I thought that actually got Houston out of rhythm a little bit at times.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, they did that against Yakashonis when they played Illinois and
mhm,
like set a tone very early in that game that more or less ended the game,
mhm.
in a
That game got
matter
out
of
of
minutes.
hand,
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
And I we'll talk about this with Khan, just like Duke's ability to attack drop coverage this season, and that's what you were going to get with against Illinois. They play that deep drop with the
Hmm.
Visage.
Hmm.
Duke just roasted that stuff I mean, just cooked it all season. Just cooked it. Their three most efficient offensive games this season, I think, were Stanford, Illinois, and Alabama. Not Alabama. Um,
Arizona.
Arizona.
They
Yeah,
would put up
Arizona.
100 in that game, so I
Yeah,
don't know.
good lord. Yeah, it was.
Survived another Caleb Love rage against the dying of the light against
Yeah.
Duke performance.
But just like specifically like Stanford and Illinois, like with how Stanford defends pick and roll with Reynaud, Maxime Reynaud, the
Hmm.
deep drop. Um, Knueppel, Cooper, so good attacking the drop space. And then Maluach, I think, is at his best as like a screen roll guy when he can use the drop space. We can talk about this more when we get to him, but just like he's, I think, most comfortable when he gets to like roll all the way downhill, as opposed to
Yeah.
against Houston, you're playing more on the short roll because they're trapping ball screens.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I think Cooper, I think we're gonna end up talking about Cooper more than I intended, but he's a fun
Yes.
player to talk about. I when I scouted Cade Cunningham in 2021,
Mhm.
I that was one where I ended up preferring Evan Mobley to Cunningham in that draft. But
Mhm.
it was like one of the first episodes of my podcast because I had just launched it during that college season. And what I was trying to find like the dominant trait of Cade's because like Flagg, his sort of appeal was across the board that he
Mhm.
did so many things very, very well. But I was trying to find an area of like true dominance. And even though Cade is like a very good shooter and an excellent passer, he had turnover issues that were kind of persistent at Oklahoma State, and he wasn't a standout athlete at the rim and above the rim at Oklahoma State. And so I was trying to articulate what I thought really a dominant trait of his was. And my conclusion was that the closest thing I could find to him that was so special was just like and it's like an intangible coach speak kind of thing, but I think it is translated and mattered, is just sort of the relentlessness and the conditioning that he always kept himself in and that he was always engaged with. To bear so much of a burden on both ends, where you were by far the lead decision maker and scorer and option on offense, and also your team's best defender and lead communicator on the other end. Like it just seems like Cade never got tired. He would get
Mhm.
beat occasionally, but never really looked like he was overwhelmed like physically.
Mhm.
And Cooper does not have the same offensive role and burden, not nearly the
Yeah.
heliocentric offensive player that
Yeah.
Cade was.
Yeah.
But in terms of that same relentlessness and conditioning, he those two sort of stand alone in terms of the players I have scouted since I have been doing this in that specific area that I
Mhm.
think, obviously is something to be very, very excited about. But what I see in Cooper, where Cooper seems the happiest and he seems the most um, just sort of in the moment, in rhythm, the skill that I think he likes to embarrass people with the most, maybe is another way of putting this, is with his passing.
Yeah.
I think that selflessness is so ingrained in his game. And I think he takes such joy in creating a great shot for other people, even though his shooting, I think, is on a very good trajectory and he'll be a very, very good shooter. That I think as far as his pro projection goes, it's obviously very, very good. But I think it reemphasizes that he I think it would be a mistake to pigeonhole him or cast him as a sort of dominant 1A offensive option. It's not that I don't think he could fill that in spurts or maybe
Mhm.
in a given playoff matchup if the matchup is favorable to his team down the road. But I just think when you will see him be himself the most and elevate his team the most is if he's not really relied on in an ISO scoring capacity that much, even though
Mhm.
he'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
But if he is really weaponizing catching the ball on the move, getting an early quick screen and being able to survey the floor very quickly. So like he's going to want to play with other high field players.
Mhm.
He's going to want to play with other selfless players who are going to, like you said, take on sort of his ethic in the game, see the game the same way. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him in a Boston Celtics style offense
Yeah.
in the pros, because he's a better Tatum was a better shooting prospect when he came out, but Flagg's a better passing prospect than
Yeah.
Tatum was.
Yeah.
And
I think
so, and like
clearly.
probably a better run and jump athlete. Flagg's a
Mhm.
great run and jump athlete, not as
It's crazy.
flexible maybe through his hips as you want him to be, which I think
Mhm.
speaks to sort of his one-on-one defensive stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
And so his struggles here and there in getting like low and around really good defenders that can match size with him.
Mhm.
These are like nitpicks. But
Yeah.
in terms of a run and jump elevation athlete, I mean, he's the
It's
real
crazy.
deal. And
It,
to pair that with his passing talent and his developing shooting
yeah.
is something very special. I mean,
Yeah, it's a
great
lot.
pro. Yeah.
It's a lot to like. Yeah, I mean, point blank period. Like if he were to end up in Charlotte, like the Hornets, I mean, they don't have the Celtics talent, but they are trying to run an offense that's very similar and run a defense that are similar. I mean, like that's what Charles Lee brought to Charlotte.
Right, right.
So it's like, yes, I mean, like they could just get Miles Bridges up out of there and have Cooper be the one, doing those orchestrating that stuff in the middle, which would be quite the upgrade in many ways. Yes, I think I'll be honest with you. I actually sort of like his shooting more than Tatum. At this
Really?
stage
You
of his
do?
career, yeah, I do. I do actually. Now it's hard. Like Tatum did come into the NBA and then shot like 50% on corner threes his rookie year. So like
Yes, he did.
maybe I might be wrong about that. But yeah, I think I like Cooper's stroke a little bit more than sort of like Tatum's. I think it's a little more fluid. Um, 84% from the line, like as just like an indicator of shooting and shooting touch. So yeah, I think I'm again Tatum, unbelievable prospect. I loved him, but I think shooting wise, I would be like slightly higher on on Cooper. And I mean we'll see where that goes. Like Tatum's obviously has this like, you know, it's one of the things that's often talked about during Tatum's career is like his relationship with his like 3-point shot, right? And like what that means for Tatum and the Boston Celtics or whatever. So like we'll see where it goes with Cooper. Um I'll be curious to sort of see like 'cause obviously he's a great shooter off the catch, but just sort of like where like the self-created threes, like how that develops. Cause that does feel like a shot that he doesn't wanna like really take all that often at this stage of his career. Cause it's just sort of we'd rather keep it moving and try to turn it into a better shot or get downhill or draw a foul or whatever. But um yeah, he is a really a special prospect. And I also think too, like I wanted to bring this up when you were talking about the sort of because I tend to agree with you in terms of like, does Cooper, where does like, can he be like a primary sort of like, go-to ISO guy?
I hate that term, but
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah.
The he this throughout this season became pretty good at like finding matchups and going after them and like getting a switch and attacking it. And then if a double team comes, making the right pass or whatever.
Hmm.
I think he was showing some tendencies. You could go back the end of the Auburn game. There's some others where just like they put him in like predator mode and would just run inverted pick and rolls and try to get a switch. And then when he would get a small on him, go after it. So as Cooper gets stronger into the NBA, and you got to remember like he's still so young and like the way he like fills out is going to be I think like a big, no surprise, but like I think that's going to be kind of a swing piece for him because he does like to get nasty and try to like post up and power through guys and stuff. It's just like he's going to need a little bit more bulk, I think, to like really tap into that stuff if he's to become that kind of like, mid-range postseason, go-to scorer.
Yeah, but I'm not really. I mean, I guess something weird can happen with his body. All of that is always possible, but I'm not
Mhm.
really worried that he's
Yeah.
not going to have the sufficient bulk
No,
to punish those
no,
mismatches.
no. They're gonna
I
put him
mean,
on. He's gonna have Jason Tatum's shoulders,
yeah,
and an upper body in 2.5 years. Yeah,
right,
yeah.
right. Okay, but let's talk about Khan. let's talk about his teammate, Mr. Knueppel. I will cards on the table say when I went back and rewatched a lot of Duke for this episode because I wanted to revisit Khan, there were times where I was like, should Kon Knueppel be the second or third pick in this draft? There, and I will, you know, I feel like I've taken a shower since then, and I'm not quite that all in on him at the moment, just at the moment, but I could always be talked into it again. Kon Knueppel, his teammate, let's see, averaged 14 and a half points, 4 rebounds, nearly 3 assists a game. And like Cooper, sterling assist to turnover ratio, very selfless player. I think he had a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. I think Cooper had like 1.6 and shot 91% from the line, almost 41% from three. I think on like 11 attempts per 100. I think he made like 84 threes this year.
If he wasn't at he was like flirt he was like either at 11.0 or like 10.9 like all season. So
Yeah,
basically 11, 11. He was right there all year.
a similar percentage and volume to what Jared McCain shot at Duke last year. And 48% from the field. Khan is, I think we talked about his listed height of 6'7" in the first episode. I don't really think he's quite that tall. I think he's probably in the 6'5" range.
Yeah.
And he certainly is not an above the rim athlete. He has 2 dunks the whole season.
They were
But
good dunks though, by the way.
were they?
Yeah, he surprised a couple of people, I think, with a couple of rim finishes he had this season. But point remains, like not like a vertical, not a lot of like vertical pop,
And
from
just so I can he does not have a lot of vertical pop. What he loves to do and what Duke would empower him to do a lot within the flow of their offense is he makes up his mind. He sees the game at a very high level and makes his decisions very early and is very decisive. And I think that word decisive can cover up some warts here and there. Like Khan is not an expert at creating sort of lateral space, nor is he a vertical athlete.
Mhm.
So what he does, he makes up for that by when he catches the ball, always being ready to shoot or drive. But his decisions are they sometimes may seem predetermined, but they really are not. It's almost like he's done all the work before the ball gets there, and he's already identified what the best option is, not the bad sort of predetermination where he only has confidence in one thing, so that's going to be the only thing that he defaults to. And since he has some thickness to him, he's over 200 pounds, listed at 217 at what I'm seeing, but I don't think he's quite that heavy. uh he weaponizes that stuff into a first step, particularly off the catch, where he frequently gets his shoulder level with his defender, if not by his defender. And he's broad enough that defenders just don't bother him if they're trying to drive with him and hang with him. And he can get to where he wants to go, which lots of times is right underneath the hoop. And what he will do is either elevate immediately or pump fake, and he likes to jump off of 2 feet a lot because I guess he has no delusions about trying to dunk on people all the time. But if he wants to throw in little wrinkles to that and stop for a little mid-range jumper or dip his shoulder to create some space or try to lean in and draw a foul and finish through contact or incorporate a jab step either at the beginning or end of his drives to create a little bit of space. He can do all that, and getting 11 threes up per 100, I mean, that is serious volume. That is a volume that any 6'2" guard would be happy with. Walter Clayton, a friend of the program, friend meaning I like him a lot. I don't think that Walton's weighed in on my episodes. he's
Hmm.
12 threes per 100, and he was sort of the darling of the tournament for his 3-point volume. And Kon
Hmm.
is, bigger, younger, and almost step for step for him right at 11. Though I guess the variety of that
Different,
shot
yeah,
is
yeah,
much
yeah.
different.
It's the off dribble stuff with
Right.
Clayton. Obviously, that's the game changer for him.
And what is interesting about Kon is that there are not many players who that I can recall scouting who play like him, where they have refined what they do as a freshman to such a degree, um, and are seemingly cool with that sort of lower usage role. Now, Cooper gets hurt in the ACC tournament and misses the last two games of it. Kon ends up being the ACC most outstanding player in that
Mhm.
tournament. Uh, and shows a bit more what he can do, especially when he gets more ball screens. Because that's another thing is they weren't running a ton of on the ball screens for Kon. He would do a lot of his work again off the catch, just beating his man.
Yeah,
But
they turn those down screens with him into pick and roll options essentially. But yeah, he's playing off the move still. It's not from a like static, standstill,
right.
point at point.
And so he creates this really interesting question, about this kind of role because he only had about I think about 20 usage, which is not like super light, but light for a draft prospect. You're expected to sort of scale up if you're going to be a lotto pick and you have that amount of usage. Um, Extremely efficient. And there's a question about, is this sort of the level of usage that he wants? Is the NBA game going to unlock more in his game, or is he going to want more out of an NBA court? Or does he sort of want to play this sort of connectory
Mhm.
way where he's a threat to shoot or pass whenever he receives the ball, but it's all very it's like a straight line between 2 points. He's not going to meander or explore or try to, get into his bag much, so to speak. So, what do you think about Kon's game and that sort of mentality specifically? Do you think that uh, there is sort of a starting guard in there who's
Mhm.
making a lot more decisions and who spends a lot more time on the ball? Or do you think sort of he wants to play that more connector role?
Yeah, it's interesting too because if he's playing the connector role, he could just be like an incredible version of that because he could also be like a connector slash like 3-point specialist too, which would be like a really powerful player to potentially have.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to see what I think he has it in him to like give you some on-ball usage and creation. Um his decisiveness, his strength, and the way he can play off he can leverage his shot to open things up and sort of like geek out defenses and then attack off that, and the way he can pass the ball and make decisions. um you touched on this. It was a great point too. Like when he does get like a little bit of inside leverage on a player, he's so like thick and strong, he can really keep them there and then extend for a finish or get the center in drop coverage to come up to him and then throw a lob pass over the top. Very good attacking drop coverage this season. Very good attacking 2-on-1s. Um, you know, I think like the height and length component is like a little interesting. Like if he is charting at like 6'5", 215, I still think there's like enough there to sort of like have the frame and the strength to be a guy that can give you some of that. But I don't know. That's something I do think this probably needs to get priced into it a little bit with him. But I do kind of believe him in him as a guy that has the ability to. I don't know about like it's not necessarily like bend and manipulate defenses, although I guess you could say with his shot, he has some sort of like gravity bending, movement shooting components to his game. But I do think of him as a guy that can, yeah, absolutely be like a driver of offense just because of the shot in the interior finishing and the ability to sort of like get to his spots on the floor. Um, he shoots it well from every level of the floor is like a green light for him.
Hmm.
Um, and you talked about his the ACC tournament for him too. Like he scaled up spectacularly in that tournament. 26% usage, 26% assist rate, 66% true shooting, 62% on twos. He got to the line a ton. That's obviously it was like a big part of it. But yeah, he was unbelievable when they called upon him, and he delivered against some pretty good teams too. I mean, Tech, UNC, Louisville, like those are good basketball teams. So yeah, I'm in on Khan. I would not put him into the top three, but or maybe even the top four. But it's like I don't know. Do we need to have like Khan versus Ace Bailey conversations? Like maybe this is the time to certainly like have those conversations. You know?
Oh,
Um.
you're asking the wrong guy because I'm
Okay.
lower on Ace. When
Okay.
I
Cool.
say I
Then
don't have, like, yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, I
okay.
mean,
Yeah.
Khan's
Then okay. So
higher
you
than
you you
12th. So
you got
yeah,
Bailey.
like,
Okay. Interesting. So you do have okay. So that's maybe the
I don't
bad.
mean, I don't mean to be rude, but
Yeah, no,
yes,
no, no,
I
no.
have
That's
Ace
a
a bit
good.
lower.
I'm not as high on Bailey. I see him mocked to the Hornets a lot, and it always makes me
Oh my God.
a little antsy. The
Of
anti
all
rim
teams to
the
go
anti
to,
rim
dude.
team with Miller
Yeah.
and Bailey and Lamelo would be a hilarious sight to see.
Yeah.
Um,
I look at that team and I just want a skinny player. It's just like, oh my
yeah,
God, please no.
someone skinny who can't get to the rim. That would be perfect. It's exactly what they need. So yeah, no, I bad player to pick, but yeah, I suppose like
But
Con
to
versus
the
Edgecombe or something, like maybe that's a better
Edgecomb's a
conversation
good
piece.
one because
Yeah.
I think like when I was really trying to put myself through the paces of whether or not he could return that level of value, I started to think back again. I try to, as much as possible, glean from the drafts that I feel like I know the most about, which are the ones that I've scouted, which started really in earnest 2021, but 2020 as well. I was like giving it a shot. And when I think back to 2020 through 2024, not to get into a bunch of arguments about it, but if you do just sort of quick pocket redrafts of those and you think about who really the signature players are, 2020 you have LaMelo, Tyrese, Ant, obviously, Maxi, and now sort of maybe Bane, Avdia, McDaniels as starters. 2021, Cade, Mobley,
Green.
Şengün, Franz, Trey Murphy, Jalen Johnson.
James Booknight, all of the greats. All of the greats. JT Thor and
uh,
Kai Jones, all of the greats.
oh my God. Oh, Charlotte. Poor
Whoops.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
But Paolo Jabari, Chet, Jalen Williams,
Yeah.
Keegan Murray. As you go through all of these, obviously Wemby and the Thompson twins, Brandon Miller,
Mhm.
uh, the through line to basically all of these players, or 90 to 95+% of them, is very quantifiable, easily identifiable two-way skills. Now, that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that LaMelo is currently a great defender, and it doesn't mean that Tyrese Halliburton is currently a great defender. But what it does mean is that if you paid attention to them in the scouting process, you would recognize that LaMelo was a very fluid 6'7" point guard who could cover
Mhm.
ground. Tyrese Halliburton, a very, fluid 6'5" point guard, 6'8", 6'9" wingspan who can cover ground, and was always a big deflections guy, is,
Mhm.
among the league leaders in steals and deflections every year in the NBA now. Like there's some semblance of two-way projectability basically in all these players that have been top of draft value since 2020.
Mhm.
And Knueppel, I think, in the same way where he has these anticipatory instincts on offense, he has anticipatory instincts on defense, but he values positioning over playmaking, or his body is more built for
Mhm.
positioning rather than playmaking. He like what I and you can correct me if you see something else, but like he'll get blown by every now and again, like lots of like
Laterally, it happens. Yeah.
right. But if he I have seen him anticipate a driver's first move where like he's essentially, I mean, you could call it guessing, but he is pretty good about it and he slides his feet and
Mhm.
he will stay with a driver basically on their first move. But you mentioned giving Flag a combo dribble. Like if you can snake a couple moves together on Khan, you will wrong foot him and you will get by
Mhm.
him. But if he's sort of guarding himself, so to speak, where he sort of knows the direction where it's going to go, he can stay in position and stay there long enough in college to force the ball elsewhere and sort of keep the defense relatively on a string where there haven't been any major breakdowns.
Mhm.
But there's a difference between doing that in at the college level and at the pro level because what he really lacks are these, recovery tools. Not a vertical athlete is not going to come in with a 6'10, plus wingspan where he can sort of erase his own mistakes or come in and help erase a teammate's mistakes. That is really what I don't see out of him. First of all, do you agree that that sort of is not really part of his game?
No, I think that's a fair assessment of Khan's defense.
And that also applies to him sort of backpedaling. He's not going to be able to
Mhm.
rise up and contest much if he is backpedaling. If he is able to,
The only thing is when he can get vertical and like that's like he's obviously pretty
like
thick
with
in
his
his chest.
chest, you mean?
Yes, yeah,
Yes, yeah, yeah.
verticality, and I mean I thought he did it, sort of like how Cam Hildreth kind of like was good at doing that at Wake the last couple of years. I thought Khan similarly that was sort of like his version of rim protection if he's in
Right.
that sort of like backpedal, sort of scenario.
Like obviously because he's this, this sort of like rosy cheeked white freshman. Like a lot of guys went at him. And I
Yeah,
think even in the tournament, he has Maluach behind him. So, like, just do the
helps.
best you can. Don't foul and hope the big fella is going to deter or alter as
Hmm.
much as he can. But like I said, positioning wise, unless he gets just truly beat by a dribble move, he's in enough of a position to where I think he surprised some guys trying to drive on him that they didn't shake him with their initial move.
Hmm.
But point being, because he still lacks, I think, these tools that would give him a margin for error, because I think his margin for error on defense is small, then I think if we're talking about him returning top of draft value, it almost has to be that he is. I kind of think he would need to be his team's point guard. Because if he's not his team's point guard, then it means that there's someone on the floor on his team smaller than him.
Yeah.
And in the shark infested waters of the NBA, if Kon Knueppel has a teammate on the floor with him that is smaller than him, unless that teammate is, Steph Curry or some other historically gifted offensive player, the amount of times the opposing offense is going to be able to target him and this other teammate of his is going to make it very difficult for them to make up enough ground on the other end. It's just going to be too much defensive vulnerability too much of the time, in my opinion. But what do
Hmm.
you think about that?
The only it's an interesting point. The only pushback I would offer is like Khan's strength. Like
Hmm.
you can hunt him in certain ways for sure. Get him in space, wipe out crossover, and try to have him spinning in circles, 26 feet from the basket. It's a little different, and obviously like there are certain unbelievable creators in the NBA got that'll just destroy you no matter what. But that's how it goes. He's a little because he is if you think he's 210, 215, 220, like whatever weight you think he is, and he is strong, he's harder to hunt as just isolate him and then bully ball him. Because he will fight in those sort of like mid post Barkley style back downs defensively. So yes, there is like a liability concern in how does that potentially play in the playoffs? How does it inform your team building? All things that you absolutely have to consider with him. But I worry a little bit less about him just being like overpowered, and more so the concern for me is sort of like laterally in space as like a matchup piece. So and again, yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
so that's sort of like where I come down to it. So like I'm less I again, something to note, but I'm like less concerned about it than I would have been with like McCain a year ago. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And who is obviously as strong as hell, but is not as tall as Khan, and also like is someone that two other things, if we're just comparing those two, struggled way more laterally guarding in space, had like way bigger issues, like corralling ball handlers on closeouts and on drives. Um, and Khan also just like does know where to be defensively. Like is not gonna like break up your team defense. And I think by the end of last season, McCain had gotten a lot better at that, but like he really struggled early on his freshman season, like knowing where to be, rotating, being in the right spots. I think Khan has that stuff down too. So certainly there are going to be bad matchups for him, but I think he's still checking he's checking the right boxes from like a team defense component and a strength component. And I think that gives you a little bit more positional flexibility in terms of like how you would maybe be building up a team, fitting him in somewhere or building it, building one around him.
I agree. I mean, the strength is it's always better to be strong and
Mhm.
be able to move than be, have a strength deficiency.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. I don't even want to put myself in the position to sort of push back on that point. I guess I just think about it goes back to his like subtle uniqueness. And I don't want to, I guess, beat around the bush with this. I see similarities in Khan's processing of the game and the sort of simplicity with which he plays that I mean, I'm gonna bring up Jokic, and I
Mhm.
don't I don't. I did. It's not what you think because Jokic
Yeah.
is obviously like one of the 10 best players ever.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just that Jokic can embarrass you, even
Mhm.
though in Jokic's mind, he's making sort of the simplest calculation. You
Mhm.
know, he like Luca does this too. There, I just mentioned another one for Kon Knueppel. In a lot of ways, it would be better if his name weren't Kon Knueppel, and I'm
Yeah,
comparing him to these like
all
legit
time.
legends.
Yeah,
But
I thought I was gonna come in with like a Devin Booker comp and was like, oh, is that gonna be too? Is that too spicy? Is that too spicy? Then you went Jokic and Luca. I'm misinterpreting obviously
that's okay.
intentionally,
No,
but
I'm getting to my point. And really,
yeah.
when you consider like Wilt Chamberlain, no. I think the idea being that those guys play at a slow pace
Mhm.
and they're very comfortable. In fact, they encourage contact with their defender. Like Luca has obviously like a really, really good bag and create room for his step back three. But even for Luca, space creation isn't the entire name of the game for him. He would much rather back someone down. And both those guys have so much more size than Khan. Not that Khan is a slouch, but Luka's 6'8", Jokic is 6'11", such and
Yeah.
such. So like that's why they are true blue 1A offensive players, on any team that they're on. But I see Khan's decision making is just so quick and he has so much comfort with contact and his pass placement is so good. None of it is flashy. None of it. He
Mhm.
doesn't do a lot of live dribble skips.
Mhm.
I didn't even see him do a ton of skips, period. But when he did them, the pass was like right. You mentioned Flagg's passing accuracy.
Mhm.
Khan's passes tend to be right there as well. It's just that the role that he was cast in, and I'm glad you brought up McCain, the role that he was cast in didn't demand a lot of complex reads from him.
Mhm.
It was usually same side of the floor, but he knew it immediately and the pass was out and on time lots of times.
Mhm.
And I think as a consequence, there becomes this question. Just like I had a question about how much usage McCain was going to be able to handle at the next level, playing in a similar system off of a jumbo wing-sized initiator,
Mhm.
that at the next level, let's say Khan, because I asked you earlier, like, what is he going to want to do? Like, what will his mentality be as a player at the next level? If he wants to try to score 20 a game, because we can just put, like, I think he is the best shooter in the draft. And if you're
Yeah.
the very best shooter in the draft,
Yeah.
then you should want to shoot as much as possible. I mean,
Mhm.
theoretically. And that's what your coach in the NBA is going to tell you to do.
Mhm.
So as the best shooter in the draft, let's say he wants as much smoke as humanly possible. And
Yeah.
now he's playing in NBA space. And now he's getting screens 30 feet from the hoop.
Mhm.
When he gets going and he has the whole floor available to him,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and he's either going downhill, attacking drop, like you mentioned, or he's got someone on his hip, I can see him being comfortable in either circumstance.
Mhm.
And the way that he's already accustomed to creating space, which is he doesn't need a lot of space to create space. You like a jab here, an elbow there, a shoulder here. I can just see it working very, very well.
Mhm.
I see that all being very translatable when you have NBA caliber talent around you, and defenses have to cover more ground to take away all of your options. And I could see, even though his passing is going to be, more over,
Mhm.
two-hand overhead than it is, crazy live dribble slings with one or the other hand, I can just see it being very clean and very difficult to stop. And
Mhm.
so that's where the upside stuff really starts to swirl around in my head about
Yeah.
what kind of a player we are dealing with here. So, like, on an NBA court, pick a team, pick the Hornets if you'd like.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think a team best weaponizes him?
I kind of like a role like Bane has in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Like like
I
let
thought about
like
him too.
like
Yeah.
the I think in terms of frame, there's some similarities too. Sort of like stocky wings, not great wingspan, big time shooting. Bane was the best shooter in that 2020 draft class. Um,
I would say Halliburton was, but yes, yeah,
okay,
he's up
yeah,
there. Yeah,
fair.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
fair. That's fair. I would have said Halliburton has certainly turned into the best shooter in the pros. If you had asked me like prior to the draft, I probably would have, I guess, incorrectly have given that distinction
A
to
very no, 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 very
yeah.
defensible opinion.
Or I would have like made the case for like Isaiah Joe or something like that. So all things that
Or 50% Aaron Neesmith. A lot of good
yeah.
shooters in that
Yeah.
draft.
It was a that was a it's funny because we probably got to like over index on that draft. Uh it just like sticks in our mind maybe a lot too because there were like extra months of like prep
It was
leading
also
into
the first one I really gave a crack
yeah,
at. So
yeah.
yeah, I remember it
Fair.
very well.
Fair. But I think
Mason Jones will live forever.
oh, wow. I promise you he thought he was the best shooter in the 2020 draft class.
Brother, he still thinks he's the best
Yeah.
shooter in the 2020
I
draft.
I
Shout out to
believe it.
Mason.
I believe it. But I think a role like that is interesting where there's some movement. Like for him, the recipe isn't going to be, oh, we're just going to give you 30 pick and rolls tonight.
No,
It's
no,
not
no,
going to
no.
be, and it's not going to be, we just asked you in the corner, and it's not going to be, just strictly movement. Like it's a full diet of things where he's gonna get some actions as a coming off down screens and flare screens. He's gonna get some actions where he's like a ghost screener and working like the
Well, that's what
Cooper
he loves to do. He
the
loves the ghost
in
screen.
in
Loves a
the
good ghost screen.
the Cooper Kon Knueppel inverted pick and roll with Kon ghosting out was
Right.
monstrous for Duke this year. It was really tough to defend. They could flip it around, then Kon could run pick and roll with Cooper, and that was also very good. Um,
I actually wish that Khan stuck and just screened and popped a little
held
bit
it,
more than
held
doing
it,
the
held
ghost,
it, held
but
it more. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
fair point.
because he could do it. I can tell that he can do it, but
Yes,
yeah,
and
yeah,
he's the kind of guy that you, at least in the, certainly in the college game, you could have. You're probably getting a switch if you're doing that, and then you can get inside leverage and play. And like he can make
right.
plays on the short roll too. I think his sort of like his best passes this season were like coming off those like wide pin downs on the left side of the floor where like he would curl right and then Maluach would dive left to the rim.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just reading the coverage and the decisive playmaking that we sort of talked about. So good there. The shooting is just going to open up so much for him. I feel like I see this a lot with Brandon Miller in Charlotte too. Like when he's healthy and available to play, like the the off ball movement, like it's not something to like necessarily like build an offense around, but it can be like a really important piece of like a good offense. You know, these sort of like movement components. And is that being a portal into Khan being able to open up pathways to the rim and passing opportunities is like a big deal for him. And then like I'd like to see like where he goes development wise, like as a playmaker. Like, are there I'm certain there's like is a level for him to get up to, but like how many levels does he have in terms of like mapping the floor, uh, making sort of like more challenging passes, more creative passes. Something we didn't, as you mentioned, we didn't get to see him do a lot this season at Duke, where he was um, just in sort of like a different kind of role. But so for me, that's sort of the thing I see, like a mix of different stuff, some on ball components, some spacing components, and then a lot of it though being wrapped around the like the screening game, whether he's the person coming off the screen or he's the person setting the screen in the action. Um Honestly, like I think he could also be awesome in a like Golden State Warriors like motion approach too. Like I think he
Of
would be
course. Yeah.
so good without the ball. He's really advanced coming off screens. Duke ran a fair amount of, like split action in their offense this season. Like he's very capable of doing all of that. And again, like Duke was running, what the Celtics are doing a lot this season too. So, maybe like this is sort of like a lower projection for him, but like a like Sam Hauser kind of role too. If like that would be more in the sort of like shooting specialist who has enough strength to like hang defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But we're sort of projecting him for something beyond that. I think at this stage. So,
Well, and I want to go back to that Bane comparison
mhm,
because it's worth it. I thought about Bane too. Worth noting, Khan is just flatly at the same age, like galaxies ahead of where
yeah,
Bane was.
yeah.
Because, Bane
No
spent
one,
4 years in
yeah.
college before and was only really an initiator point guard his last season at TCU before he entered the draft.
Mhm,
Now, Bane also, I feel like, Bane was a very rapid improver, and it's hard. Bane's sort of an unprecedented body type at guard, and it's sort of
mhm.
hard to understand what you have when you have it in the moment. I think with Khan, I guess the passing component is what is sticking out with me. Like you mentioned that playmaking at the end there, what you just said. But do you think if he is in the middle of a really spread floor, that
Mhm.
he will be able to weaponize like passes to either corner? We've seen him go, middle so much with
Mhm.
Maluach at Duke. Do you think that he will be able to like really hit those passes on time and on target to keep a defense in rotation to where like putting the ball in his hands, maybe not for 30 pick and rolls every game,
Mhm.
but for a Bookerish diet of touches every game would make sense and be fruitful for an NBA offense? Or do you think he just at a certain level cannot handle that much usage?
Yeah, that is maybe the question to ask with him, honestly.
Yeah.
Because it's if you're going just off of Duke film, like you're trying to piece together sort of because he didn't you didn't see it a lot this season. You're trying to like piece together sort of like different micro skill components of his game and try to
Right.
then just like project it outwardly in a league with better athletes but more spacing. And sort of like with him, developing as a player too. I don't think it's if if this is a cop out, I apologize. It's like to me, it doesn't seem like something that would come naturally to him, but I could see him like mechanically getting there with sort of in the way. I mean, like Bane has become a better playmaker. Um, so I think there's a chance for him to sort of like level up like that, but I'm not sure right now. I see just like all court, you know, you just spraying the floor with passes like all Halliburton, LaMelo style. Like I don't see certainly that.
Not in that way because they
Yeah,
do it on the move.
yeah.
And they really Halliburton is a jump pass connoisseur.
Savant. I mean, he's the probably the best ever,
Right.
maybe.
And Khan leaves his feet on a bunch of passes too, but kind of more by necessity than preference.
Hmm.
I would and that's why, I mean, I brought up Jokic and Luka and talking about them, but they're the more sort of quote unquote, I don't want to call them stationary passers. But they
Hmm.
can pass out of more stationary body positions, or they can pass with someone on their hip just so comfortably, probably
Hmm.
more comfortably than any two players who've ever played basketball, granted. But that's where I just am trying to figure out what that's like in a 6'5"
Yeah,
supplementary guard.
yeah. The
Where those micro skills go in a guard like that, how you leverage passing skills in a guard like that. And that's why I said, I'd come down off of him
Mhm.
as a top 3 player in the draft because ultimately I think I'm getting kind of into novelty land when I think about the kind of player that he's going to be. Not that his drafting team should not really like they shouldn't see him as a novelty. They should
Mhm.
explore every facet of his talent that they can. But
Yeah.
I don't know that I saw him actually lay in a crossover to gain a step on a defender 5 times this year. It's all just so direct with him that it I just wonder if there needs to be a certain level of exploration in his game to get a top 4 outcome.
Mhm.
That's sort of the other part of this when I asked you about mentality is that how much of an exploratory player is he, or can you get to, I don't know, a $30 million a year player, a top 3 starter on a contender by being so direct with how you play? What do you think?
I think. Well, I saw Gordon Hayward become a $30 million a year player in Charlotte, even after he had lost a step and was no longer the sort of like vertical guy that he had been in
Mm-hmm.
Utah. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Hayward was 6'8", like a
Mm-hmm.
different, could access different spots and could sort of like just with a high release point, be a guy that could score without separation. You know what I
And
mean?
could still elevate too.
Yeah.
Not to the same extent, but
Yeah,
yeah.
not the yeah. I mean, early in his career, Quinn Snyder ran lob plays for him. Like, just say that wasn't happening for with James Borrego in Charlotte in Hayward all that much. I think that's kind of an interesting uh possibility for. So yes, I think there is a chance because he can shoot it and because he has some of these like passing skills that like I think he could become a good enough of an offensive player to also like in 5 years I don't like a $30 million contract might not be that frivolous in the NBA too
Sure.
as the cap continues to spike, but yes, I think he has the by a $30 million a year guy you're sort of looking at like a top 3 guy on an offense, right? And sort of like is
Exactly.
that like a fair sort of like
I mean, we keep
you know
talking about Bane. I mean, he is
yeah,
literally the poster boy for what we are talking about
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
terms
yeah.
of plays with 2 other all-stars,
Yeah.
but
And a
clearly has
small
a lot of
guard.
value
Like
himself,
and next to a smaller guard too, which I
Right.
do think that's gonna have to, Bane's obviously gotten to dabble some, obviously has played Morant's not available all that often. So um I think, yeah, I do really think that's sort of like the carve out for him. But I don't know. I could see a role where also like Khan is getting sort of like more mid range, mid post usage, and he's sort of like creating out of that. And that's where he's also getting some of his passing opportunities. And so even if you're not it's not the sort of like all court um uber creative, manipulation, breakdown kind of passing, he's still able to be a little less predetermined and just sort of like see how teams are covering him and, seeing where the help's pulling in from and make plays out of that. And being a guy that could potentially get two to the ball. You know what I mean? Like ultimately, like aren't isn't that one of the things we're kind of asking? Like is Khan someone that can threaten defenses enough that they have to pull in an extra defender on him? And like what do those possessions look like? I think one of the routes to that is sort of these like mid post isolations. I think one of the other ones is him, coming off of down screens. It's harder to see it in the pick and roll, like just which is like is why that's sort of like the crux of the decision with where do you have Khan in the draft? Is he the
Right.
kind of guy? Is he the kind of guy that can like really threaten a defense and make them like anxious in terms of like what he's capable of doing with a live like in a live ball coming off the
Well,
pick and roll?
like McCain, the first dimension you establish with him, I think, is coming off of screens off the ball and just
Hmm.
using his gravity.
Yeah,
Because it's not like, again, like with the rest of his game, it's not he's not a big, you know, Walter Clayton take off with your shoulders parallel to the basket and square him in the air kind of guy. That's not
yeah,
really Khan's game. But it is a, my feet are always set when I receive the ball and the ball's out.
yeah.
Like it's just he gets organized very, very quickly. That's why he's up to around 11 threes per 100. But if you start him as that sort of off ball mover and threat first, teams are going to really have to pay attention to him, obviously. And I think there's a temptation with a body type like his to not project a lot of useful physical developments, but he will have useful physical developments, like all good NBA players do as they enter their early to mid 20s. Like his core will get stronger. And
Hmm.
that means that these shots that he can, let fly from 23 feet, he'll probably be able to let fly from 28 feet. I mean, that's what being the best shooter in your class means. And I know I keep referring to him as that. Maybe I'm wrong in that evaluation. But if that's what he turns out to be, he will be able to hit from 28 plus like
Hmm.
regularly in the NBA.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, this
yeah,
is 91% on 130 free throws, not a small sample, 56% on twos, 41% on over 200 attempts from three as a freshman.
yeah. And
So, like, if you just want to leverage that skill the most first and see what sort of reads he can
mhm,
make out of all of that, then I like you'll arrive at your value pretty quickly because
mhm.
that driving talent that he has where he gets downhill quicker than you think he's going to, you'll have defenses collapsing and just reacting to the fact that ooh, we lost him, ooh, we tried to close out on him, ooh, he's by us. Where are our other, like that's why in that sort of connector plus kind of role, like I guess is what I'll call it. I think that he's such a good bet to thrive. And when you view this draft in context, like I mentioned, all those other players from the previous 5 years and the two-way skills they have, a lot of the two-way skill guys to project in this draft have questions, if not about their efficiency, then certainly about their three-point volume.
Mhm.
Like, what is Colin Murray Boyle's three-point volume going to be in the pros? I don't know.
Yeah.
What is VJ Edgecombe such a like a unbelievable athlete, but is he going to be initiating a lot? And how do his guard skills look running a team? It's kind of tricky work chasing Donovan Mitchell. There's really only one Donovan Mitchell. There's Jaden Ivey and Jalen Green, but
Yeah.
you go into that field and now you're kind of in
Yeah.
rockier ground. And
Yeah.
so if
Yeah.
you want to take the sure thing in Khan, then there's in this class in particular, there is an argument for taking him quite high, where
Mhm.
he is like nestled safely in the top 10. And another way to think about it is like, do you really want to wait around for pick 8 for him to go to the Spurs? Is that what you really want?
Yeah,
I,
for him to turn into Austin Reeves, playing next to Wemby or whatever.
I,
Yeah,
I'm just saying, man. I mean, it's
yeah,
another way to think about the draft is who would you want least playing for your rivals? And
yeah,
I don't know. I get that, like, I think it's important that we've gone through his sort of weaknesses and his tendencies and everything like that, but that shooting talent, it's
big time.
just it's
Yeah,
it that stuff tends to get underrated every single cycle.
yeah.
So,
What's gonna be funny for him too, because this definitely happened with him coming into Duke this season. And maybe after the year he had, this won't be a thing, but like he was the guy in the off season last year. Every time you spoke with someone, or if guys on the team were talking about like who's surprising you with how well they're playing in the offseason,
mhm.
it was universally it was Khan. Wasn't Cooper Flagg or Khaman Maluach. I mean, those guys had other obligations and stuff too, but like it was Khan across the board. And just wait for the like the Vegas Summer League story where it's like, yeah, people in the Spurs can't believe how good Kon Knueppel, just like there's it he's primed for like one of those stories because like yeah, doesn't his physical aesthetics are not they don't ring out NBA superstar.
Right.
But he has the chance to be a very good, very important like offensive and winning player for a team going forward.
Well, and to contrast, another guy that I think is mocked probably around the same area as Khan, although I think at the moment, maybe it's sort of 50-50 as to
Mhm.
who is mocked higher, would be Jase Richardson, Michigan State. I don't know
Yeah.
how much you have watched
I like
Jase.
him. I like him a lot.
Yeah, Jase is good.
Yeah.
Clearly very good. But like Khan, played with a bunch of other ball handlers, about 20% usage, really good assist to turnover ratio,
Mhm.
really good shooter. Now he shot 84% from the line on fewer attempts. He
Yeah.
didn't start the whole season the way Khan did, but
Mhm.
once he did start, his usage was above 20. He scored about 16 a game. And in an environment and for a coach who frequently suppresses
Yeah. Even
the role and potentially the talent of his freshmen.
very restrictive like set. I mean, like in some ways it worked for him. He's so good coming off those curls to his left hand, Richardson,
Yeah.
in Michigan State with their, floppy action and their handoffs. Like that was, their zoom action out of the horns. Like they could feature that for him. I like Richardson a lot. Obviously, like sometimes he's able to hang. Like I wish he was taller than 6'2".
Me too.
His like ability, his vertical hang time is like scary. Sometimes like it just jumps off the screen. Some of the blocks I saw him have this season were pretty ridiculous. I don't know if I see the shot creation right away that I've seen. I've seen some people who are very high on his ability to create offense like with off the bounce, and I'm just not. Maybe I haven't seen the right games of his, but I'm not there yet. And to me, he's also still very with the bounce. He's like very left-handed reliant in a way that doesn't have to by no means has to define him. It just sort of like I think where he is at this stage in terms of like live ball creation. To me, he feels very one-sided.
I don't disagree, but I think he's much more naturally explorative than
Hmm.
Khan is. And Khan
Yeah.
hasn't needed to be. I mean, we're talking about two freshmen. I mean, Khan true shooting was 64, which is in outer space, and Jace's was 62, which is, and it's just excellent. It's
Very good.
unbelievably
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
but when Jace plays, you see, like, I see him. I don't want to over index it, but I see him just exploring more parts of the floor with his dribble, snaking more pick and rolls in order to
Mm.
survey what's in front of him, and uh, trying to cross up his defender to create sort of lateral or backward space. Just stuff that approximates more what higher usage guards in the league do.
Hmm.
But there are plenty of guards who waste dribbles doing that and cost their team on offensive possessions as well. So that's why I said, like, I don't want to valorize the fact that Jase has a bit more of that in his game. But for two guys who are both sort of necessarily kind of supplementary guards because they lack the athleticism of
Mhm.
like a no doubt whiz bang NBA starting high volume point guard. It's interesting. Jace
Mhm.
has more of those sort of recovery tools, more of that two-way
Yeah.
projectability because of that hang time. You mentioned his blocks. I think they're both good rebounders. I think Jace is maybe a better out of area rebounder, but Khan's very good at positioning
Yep.
himself for rebounds and reading
Yep.
the ball off the rim.
Mhm.
Like it's an interesting test on who you prefer. It would not surprise me if most preferred Jace because again, his athletic profile is more immediately recognizable.
Mhm.
So I can certainly understand that. And Jace might be like he has a case of the best player in the or the pardon me, the best shooter in the draft.
Mhm.
Or the second best shooter in the draft or whatever. Like the resume's there. I can see why people might prefer him a bit more. I just think the size difference there is very meaningful to me
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
Jace is now a supplementary guard at 6'3", and
Mhm.
that now you're really small. Now you need to be like the Cleveland Cavaliers, or else you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I will likely end up preferring Khan to Jace, even though I like both a great deal.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
what do you think?
I think I too lean Khan, but I like Jace quite a bit. They to me are safely top 10 picks, top,
Mm.
guys. I like Jace a lot. Um and I've seen probably I would say like a handful, half dozen of his games that I've clipped and charted. Looking forward to watching more of him.
Would you agree he's more of that aggressive kind of passer too, more aggressively seeking out sort of floor warping or floor bending passes?
I'll have to watch more to
Because of
so to
Michigan
to
State,
get
the
there.
system is very like it's
Oh,
all like one pass away. But I do
the
see him occasionally trying that stuff.
I do like their Michigan State is both like a very like satisfying half court offense to watch and also like very frustrating because like they're running sets every time and it's like fun to see the pieces sort of like revolve around one another. But then there are games where you're just like, all right, I would like to see Jase Richardson play with the ball more and less,
Hmm.
Fears or Holloman or one of the other guards.
Akins, Jay
Yeah,
Nakins, yeah,
Akins, yeah.
yeah.
Or Fiddler or whatever. Yeah.
More Cohen Carr though. We like Cohen Carr, yeah.
Cohen Carr. I will say I was I have my fun Cohen Carr stat. I was stumbling into this. There were two guys in Division One basketball this season that were 6'6" or shorter that had 50 dunks. It was Cohen Carr and Kristen Shoemate, who played for Will Wade at McNeese State. But like I've been watching a lot of McNeese State film recently, and I was like, man,
Sure.
Shoemate dunk, man, this guy dunks a lot. I was like, I went into Bart Torvik. I was like, how many 6'6" guys had 50 or more dunks this season? It was like there were only two, and of course Cohen Carr's name popped right up, and I was like, man, special athlete, special
Was that any
athlete.
relation to JT Shoemate?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
Oh,
No, I don't believe so.
tough.
Yeah, but good, very good player, but like a 6'5" center for McNeese State in whatever craziness they were running this season. But no, I like Jace a lot. And again, the vertical hang time, very fun. And I just think guys like Khan and Jace that know how to play without the basketball as like freshmen
Right.
really, and we talked about Cooper, he knows how to do it too, but just like super impressive. Those guys like know where to be, and even on plays where they're like, it's not designed for them or whatever, their ability to come off screens, be set up, be shot ready, like all of that basketball 101 stuff, to me it does strike me as being like an impressive tool for like lottery bound, one and done prospects. I give those guys a lot of credit for sort of like having those skills already like on the menu.
Yeah, I think kind of, I mean, I would have to study draft history more, but I also think that is a developing
Hmm.
s- sub category of player. I don't even want to say archetype because I think just talking about off-ball skills in general, there's lots of different shades of them. But
Sure, sure.
one and done players who really or I don't want to even say specialized, but whose most projectable role is off the ball. Like maybe
Hmm.
you could go back to when shooting guards were truly shooting guards, and it was all about
Hmm.
getting them open in order for them to shoot the ball, and that's all that that was their biggest
Yeah.
contribution. But in terms of the modern game, like McCain really throws me, man. Like he's in my head a lot this year, and it's dangerous
Yeah.
because his stuff was small sample, and it's not like the Sixers were winning a ton of those games. But he
Hmm.
was a
Awesome.
clearly positive player for them.
Yeah.
Clearly.
He was he was going to win Rookie of the Year, most likely if he
Well,
had just
of
like
course, of course.
stayed
But
healthy and
but
kept
even
humming.
in those games, it's not as though he was playing on some lost team and they were just jacking his usage
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it stuck out a lot. And that's why I'm keeping all of this off-ball stuff really in mind and
Hmm.
trying as much as I can to put other guys like through that ringer.
Yeah.
But
I think also just like the
yeah,
way
go ahead.
teams are sort of like exploring more like 5-out offense and sort of like what that means, what that can look like. Um, Sort of like diving into the movement components, like sort of like what does it mean that we can do offensively if our center is here 25 feet from the rim,
Right.
as opposed to that being like a ball screen as it has been for much of the last 10 years, or a post up the 20 years before that. What can we create off of that, and who are this like what are the best ways we can sort of like amplify that spacing component of our offense? um and I mean, Khan was a hugely successful with doing that, both individually and helping out Duke's half court offense this season. And yeah, McCain is certainly someone that has now done that at multiple levels, and it just feels like a totally bankable thing for him going forward, which is why like he's set himself up to probably have a pretty high floor, as an NBA guard going forward.
Well, let's shift gears to his teammate, Khaman Maluach.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy who you see if you look at the right board on the right day, he's placed in the top five. I certainly have seen him that high or higher, on certain boards here and there. And you know, there's so many different ways to talk about Kaman. First of all, quite literally free him so that he can play in the NBA next year.
This is ridiculous.
But assuming we get there,
It's not the worst thing in the world right now, but it
no,
is it
it's not.
is it is pretty absurd and bad. And
Yeah.
yeah, this should not be happening.
Um, do you think as you project him in the draft, I think the tendency to put him so high is the idea is that he's like all defense
Mhm.
with projectable shooting. I think is if you wanted to make sort of a tagline
Yeah.
for him that he's going to be an all defense level defender one day
Yeah.
with enough shooting talent to stretch,
Yeah.
like sort of a blue chip, Brooke Lopez, something like that.
Mhm.
Even though he probably is a better lateral athlete or lateral prospect than Brooke was. Um,
Mhm.
do you think that he is a better defensive? Do you think his value right now is more on the defensive end or more on the offensive end as a prospect?
Yeah, this is like the Mark Williams
It
color
is.
area. It really is.
It is.
I think, man, it's weird because I think for Duke this season it was defense, but it's almost hard to measure because like the stuff he does offensively that is so important and was like a huge piece for Duke to have the best offense in the country is he's not even getting the ball. Like he is so willing to screen and dive and sell out as a rim runner every time, and the value that has for a half court offense to have this 7-2 guy that is flying around 100 miles per hour. His willingness to screen and dive and to do it 100 times per game and to still give you defense on the other end. is
I
hugely
actually think so.
valuable.
I think Duke kind of spoiled themselves with it in the tournament. I think they got so comfortable with him as a release valve against
Hmm.
Arizona and against Alabama because the matchups allowed for it in those
Hmm.
games that I think they looked for him a little too much in those spots against Houston, and I think it hurt them. But go ahead, yeah.
As like a lob threat, like a lob release.
Not
Is that what
even
you're saying?
like as both a scripted lob threat and as sort of a breakdown release valve. If Houston
Yeah,
was cutting off a driving lane, I think they would just look to dump it into him or to just sort of throw it up to him, hoping he
yeah.
would come down and put it away.
There's
Yeah.
definitely part of their game where like when one of the with Duke this season, like when if the first sided action like doesn't really get anywhere, they like to then skip it to Maluach like at the elbow and then like flow into a handoff or another quick action off of that. It's actually one of the, I mean, for whatever it's worth, one of the reasons why when people say that he's just like a rim runner, I will push back on that a little bit. I think he actually has shown a little bit of like feel, and I obviously didn't have many assists this season, so it's not like he's a hub or anything like that. But I actually think he's a little bit more. I think the season at Duke for him was good because he sort of got to play a lot of this sort of like flash game,
Mm,
coming up to the elbow, being the release valve, and getting the ball to the second side, and then getting into the screen roll action off of that. Um, I don't know about the shot long term. I mean, the fact that he shot it pretty well on free throws at Duke this season before he got to Duke is encouraging. To answer your original question, I think I would say defense. I think I would still say defense for Maluach, even though I think his defense sometimes leaves things to be desired. Like he's six, what, 6.5, 7% block rate. It's good, but it's not. I mean, it's not where Mark Williams and Derek Lively and some of these other, top center, number two
right.
center prospects in their draft were. Um, and Duke obviously used him to switch out a lot this season, and he's more than willing to do that. And he had some great possessions switching out, but like he got beaten a lot at the point of attack when he switched out, and just like Duke's team defense having Cooper and Sion James flying around back there, I think helped close a lot of space down. Um,
Yeah.
when Kon was able to get like attacked off the dribble. So I think I would still say defense, but I understand the argument for his offense. Maybe if there was a little bit more of a 3-point shot to go on, I would lean in the other direction, but I think I'd say defense. Where do you fall on that? I'd be curious to hear your answer.
I honestly I lean offense.
Okay, that's fair.
Just because like when I look at what made you said it yourself that, Duke had, I think, the number one ranked offense in the country by efficiency. I think so much of that was having him in the middle
For sure.
just as a player that you had to account for all the time
No
and
doubt.
pay attention to all the time, even if the ball was not coming to him. And I think that will that vertical spacing will translate to the pros. I mean, that
100%.
is a finisher like that. And he shot 75% from two, a lot of that on finishes at the rim, but still,
81% at the rim, by the
yeah.
way,
So
according to
like
CBB analytics.
be being able to do that is an underrated true skill that there are centers. Nikola Jokic, I'm going to keep invoking his name with every prospect we talk about. Like, he's not going to be able to adequately defend a pick and roll where Maluach is diving and rising. That is one where Jokic says, you can have that one. Like, I'll
Mhm.
get you on the other end over the course of a full game. But it's something that Luka with Lively and Gafford, like, you have like an elite tier of rim runner guy out there who can hang on defense and who can make some plays out of the short roll, which I think Maluach in time will probably be able to do. He's not at the level Lively was, not
No,
by a long
no,
shot.
we
But
Lively is also just like special. Like
yes,
guys that size, that age just don't move like that, man. I mean, he's outlier in a lot of ways.
I agree. I agree. But I just think starting with the finishing first and just the touch around the rim.
Mhm.
coupled with the movement skills that he does have, I
Mhm.
think gives him a really good base to work with on offense. And I think on defense, I feel bad because I don't want to talk about a clearly talented defensive player just by the negative things that I see.
Mhm.
But he looked to me like he was trying. I could see his wheels spinning where he was trying very much to execute his assignment and to be in the right place and to not foul. Very
Mhm.
much doing, I'm sure, what he has been coached to do, where I'm sure he's been told by Duke staff, like, we don't want you lurching out of position. We don't want you in foul trouble. You don't need to block every shot.
Mhm.
Like, you just be you and be in the right place. And that's going to lead to like exactly what we want on defense. And I get why you would coach it up that way. That's fine. I just, when you look at who the defensive difference makers are in the NBA, not many people play defense. The people who do play defense that way, but are also defensive predators who will just like blow up plays all the time with their tools, their recovery,
Mhm.
their ability to read the game and like go for it and involve themselves proactively and like risk a foul and develop the sense of how to put themselves in the right spot without fouling, but still by being very aggressive, playing the ball. And I really did not see a lot of that with Maluach. Like, obviously, he's 7'2". He's going to get his fair share of blocks. But his steal rate was also like minuscule, tiny.
Mhm.
And he wasn't like, I didn't really see a lot of aggression. Not even on switches, but just like interior passing lane kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like Derek Queen is more aggressive, not
I mean, it,
necessarily a better defensive prospect,
yeah.
but like
I
the
mean,
guys,
Kaman's backup, both of
yes.
his backups are much more aggressive, especially Malik Brown. Malik
Malik, see,
Brown's like
Malik has it. Malik
Malik's.
has
Yeah,
that stuff that I'm talking about, where it's
he's.
like
We're gonna talk
he
about him more next year too. I think Malik Brown is an NBA player just because he's
like
such a weirdo, like awesome defender and athlete.
but he is a guy who's out there playing a lot off of instinct because he's built up the reps. And some
Hmm.
guys just have this gift and others do not, where he's like, the ball is mine to take. I am
Yeah,
going like and
yeah.
not in a way where I'm going to cost my team, but like if you're in my airspace, I'm going after it.
Hmm.
Like Matas Buzelis, for as weird as he is, just has that really blessed sort of ability to place his hands and deflect.
Yeah,
Holmgren is another one. You know, like, and when you look at all defense teams, it's just full of those kinds of players.
yeah.
Derek White with like a 5 block rate as a guard. Amen
That's
Thompson.
crazy.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, Tari Eason may not make it this year, but he'll make it one year. Dyson Daniels. To say nothing of the app like the superhuman Giannis, Mobley,
Sure, sure.
Wemby,
Yeah.
Jaren Jackson. Like Malawatch to me, and he's so young too, which is another part of this. Like he has so much of his career ahead of him. But there are so many hurdles I feel like he needs to clear in order to become a player in the NBA who can make money off of his defense. I just think that is so far away for him because like now even you go back and watch that Arizona game, you know, Caleb Love like went at him in, you know, attacking him downhill in pick and roll and
Hmm.
was not bothered by him much at all. And they killed Baylor and were not seriously threatened by Baylor. But in the post, Norchad Omir went at him and scored on him 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. And that's Omir is almost like the worst kind of like matchup for him. That honestly, like that's kind of what Mark Williams, like it was the sort of like
Right,
the
right.
like 6'8", 250 guys, you know, that could just like sort of like chisel and get underneath him and then score, you know, sort of like around them or put them into the basket and then sort of like finish around them or use their speed to kind of like drive them or whatever. Um, yeah, I think those were the guys that bothered him. Honestly, I think those were also like when Cooper had to guard those kinds of fours like Jawan Roberts. I also think those are the guys that gave him, you know, KJ Adams, Jawan Roberts. Those are the guys that gave him like the most trouble Ian Shefflin at Clemson. Those are guys that gave
Sure.
him the most trouble this season too. They're also all like 5 years older than Cooper.
Exactly. Like
You know?
that is a common problem for younger prospects. But to your point about comparing him to other one and dones, like some one and dones just still have the athletic tools, like coupled with
Mhm.
the aggression to still make their fair share of plays and win their
Yep.
fair share of those matchups.
Yep.
And that's why, like when I think back on this Duke team, it's not that they couldn't, like they played plenty of defense. Like they were I think a good to excellent defensive team by college standards.
Hmm.
But to me, when they were really cooking, it was because of how hard they were to guard. And
Yeah.
that's where I think Maluach added the most dimension to them. And where
Yep.
I think in his early NBA career, he will add the most. It's not that I don't think he can be this two-way player down the line.
Mhm.
I can't rank him in the top five when I feel like the shot is far away and this defense is also far
Yeah.
away too. Like I think as a prospect, as just a prospect, Donovan Clingan was a better defensive player last year than
Yeah.
Maluach is now.
For
Like, clearly.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
In an awesome defensive center,
Right.
defensive center prospect too. So like, it's not so much even a slight on Khaman than it is just sort of really heaping praise on Klingon. Yeah, maybe the way to think another way to think about this is like this is narrowing it maybe a little too much, but like Khaman is an excellent offensive rebounder. Defensive rebounding, the numbers are like okay individually,
Hmm.
but I mean he that is something he struggles. I thought he got better throughout the season, then I thought late in the season it sort of started to trend in the other direction too. Like it is these are just two numbers I'm going to throw at you, but it's like Duke was on a per possession basis a better defense in terms of efficiency and defensive rebounding team with Maluach off the floor this season.
Yeah.
Now they were very good with him on the court in those categories too, but with Kaman on the bench this season, 96 points per 100 possessions allowed, and Duke getting 75% of their defensive rebounds. So, and their numbers with him also very good, but not quite the same. 98 points per 100 possessions allowed, and 71% defensive rebound rate. And you can just see sometimes he's right there and he just has trouble squeezing the ball. So I think sometimes it's just like a feel and a timing thing. I do think like there is a physicality component with him.
There is.
Mark Williams dealt with this too. I think still kind of is in the NBA, where Mark has been a better offense. I mean, like what's tough is like this has kind of followed Mark into the pros too. Like he's a better. If you watch Mark Williams play, like he's probably on a night to night, possession by possession basis more impactful offensively than he is, as like a rim protector defender for
Certainly.
the
But like
Hornets.
he was, I think, even more clearly an offensively tilted player at
Yeah.
Duke
The only
than defensive.
I think that's fair. I guess like the blocks could sort of like make you they were like a
Hmm.
little misleading, maybe. Not in terms of like he was a great shot blocker, they were very impactful, but like it would make you think that like you're fitting him into this archetype of like defensive anchor as opposed to like vertical threat, lob rim runner that we're going to try to like mold these tools and these rim protection traits into a defensive anchor.
Hmm.
And maybe Malwatch is heading into a certain path. I know Duke tried to work on him with his physicality this year. Like, if you like early in the season, do you remember Theo John who played at Marquette and then he played
Yeah.
at Duke for a season? He was Mark Williams' backup a couple years ago.
Yep.
He was recovering from an injury, so he was basically like on Duke's coaching staff for like half the season to start the year, and they 100% brought Theo in to like toughen to try to like help toughen like get Kaman's like mentality to like physically dominate to like level him up there. I think it. I mean, I don't know if that was Theo or a lot of people deserve credit. Probably mostly Kaman. I think he got better at that throughout the season, but still certainly like a ways to go too. So, um, but yeah, the offense it's a big part of it, and the rim running components of it, the willingness to give himself up, um, are yeah integral. And I think Duke did a nice job featuring him in that way, which is going to be like quickly transferable to his role, in the NBA, like year one.
Do you have a draft range for him? Like what?
I need to think about it a little bit. I mean, probably in like the 5 to 10 range,
So
maybe I
you
would
would
say.
still you think of him as the top 10. Like I certainly get it. I
Yeah.
maybe I will have him there, but I flirt with
Do
having him
you?
like 10 to 15.
I think that's fair. I don't think that's like outlandish. I mean, do you have him as center one in this draft? And you had to,
I guess
or would you have Queen slightly ahead of
Queen
him?
right now I would probably say I have Queen ahead of him. And I
I
think
like them both a lot.
and Queen has his own fit concerns, obviously.
I
It's
think,
just that when you
yeah.
know,
I think his concerns are actually like much higher, but like there's this you could disagree with that. In my opinion, their fit concerns with him are like something to like really have to like think about. Maluach, he's sort of like so contemporary. Like he just fits this like modern five physical attribute standpoint. The Queen's offensive upside is just so dramatic. It's like what because of his skill that he could be an offensive hub, and if he's that, then that's pretty special. But you're still going to always have to think about the team building components around him. I feel.
yeah, I guess what I would say is when you call Maluach modern, so much of the NBA is going increasingly to be like determined by players who are over 6'9" or 6'10" and
Hmm.
whatever. And those players almost universally are most weaponized at center, almost universally.
Hmm.
You get your exceptions where, Giannis can play with a Brook Lopez. And I think that's sort of what you would, again, if you're valuing Maluach highly, you are envisioning him being able to play with one of these guys
Yeah.
as he can play with Alex Sarr if you really like Alex Sarr or whatever.
Hmm.
But by giving him a starting five role, I think there is a good chance that you are then depriving minutes at the five for your best offensive player. And you
Hmm.
can always close with that player at five, but then you're spending a top 10 pick on a player you're not closing with. If Maluach is spent, is picked that highly. I just think subtly, it's not what it used to be where you can just assume that because Maluach is clearly a true five, that when he's in his prime, he'll just play 30 minutes a night at five. Like, I just don't think that's going to happen for him. That doesn't mean he's not worth a
Really.
top 5 to 10 pick. It's just that I, the idea, and I agree that Queen's fit issues are really, really difficult, but
Hmm.
I just think the NBA is headed toward just weaponizing so much offensive talent all of the time everywhere.
Hmm.
And that's not to write off Maluach because he's a talented offensive player. So
Hmm.
I certainly still understand ranking him over Queen in a vacuum. It's just I I just think the defensive stuff with him is being over indexed is what I would say as to both
Yeah.
how useful it's going to be for him in the pros and to how much of a base it guarantees him in the pros as
Hmm.
well and to how
Yeah.
long it's going to take.
The
So
the the only other two things I would say about Kaman's defense, real quickly, would be he handled a lot of like Duke threw a lot of different stuff at him defensively this season.
mhm.
He guarded pick and roll in probably 12 different ways, but sort of like broadly speaking, like 4 ways with switch, drop, up at the level, blitzing ball screens, weaking ball screens. Those are probably the main ones. And I thought he nailed a lot of that stuff. This is something we talked about with Lively 2 years ago. And it was something that Lively had, Malwatch has. I did not see it from Mark Williams. Khaman is a
A communicator.
constant
Yeah.
communicator. He is
Yeah.
constantly, and so like I think there are some very tangible ways that he projects to a guy that could become like a defensive anchor and give you some scheme versatility. In a way that Derek Queen just probably is never going to be able to do. And it's easier to build. around that than it is to Queen, though Queen's offensive upside is so dramatic, or just is so impressive that to me, just it'll become sort of like an eye of the beholder kind of thing. But
Yeah, it would not stun me if both of those guys sort of did not close the majority of their games. Would not surprise me. But
yeah,
if I'm betting on one of them to close lots of games for a very good team, it's a tough question. But
yeah. It's just like if Maluach, like he makes free throws and protects the rim. And like even if the rim protection is like not what you want, that is someone who has the potential to be on the floor late in games. Plus he can switch some too. And like,
that's
you know,
true. I mean,
so
that's
you know, again, like
that's true.
we'll have the next 2.5 months to like talk about it with those two guys, you know. But I think there's like a pathway for Khaman to be that guy. And if the 3-pointer comes along, then I'm a little skeptical. But like if it comes along, then we're having a you know even a more expanded conversation with him.
And Kaman is also what, like almost 18 months or something younger than Queen
Yeah,
as well. That's
yeah,
another big factor to consider. So
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
could see it for sure. Okay. Anything else you want to hit on? I know it's very, very late your time, and I want to
Yeah.
be respectful.
No, it's I'm enjoying it. Glad we finally got on here and to talk a little bit. It's fun talking through these guys that you know, Maluach and Knueppel. Not like they're very notable prospects and players, but certainly fall.
Would you draft Maluach ahead of Knueppel? Let's say you needed a center. Would you then take Maluach ahead of Knueppel?
I still think I would take oh I still think I would take Knueppel mostly because I'm not sure where Maluach's offense lands. Like I like what he's offering now, and I think there's maybe some hope. Like, could he have a face-up game, you know, and do stuff in the? Could he be a guy that you actually like throw the ball to, you know, and expect him to like actually like be like a play finisher in space, not just at the rim? And I guess there's some possibility of that. It feels much further away than now. I tend to want to like draft a lot for offense, and
Right.
we spoke a lot about Knueppel and sort of like where we're at from a shooting and scoring and creation standpoint. So I think I would take Knueppel, but like it's probably pretty close between those two. So and I never really want to like draft for need. Like I just I'd rather take the best available guy and go with that. And I think yeah, I probably would lean Khan from just like an overall prospect standpoint. It has mostly has to do with like his offense and his shooting. I mean, he's the best. I agree with you. I think he's the best shooter in the class,
Yeah.
and that a lot of weight I think comes with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. I would
so
take him as well.
yeah,
So, yeah. Well, Brian Geisinger, thank you very much. Split the Action is your Substack's title, but it's briangeisinger.substack.com, Geisinger. Uh, briangeisinger.bsky.social. And anything else you wanna promote to these people before I
no,
let you go?
oh, we just say we'll be on my podcast, Buzzbeat, where we weekly Hornets podcast cover the Hornets. We've added some co-hosts in recent weeks, which is exciting. So we're gonna hopefully be pumping out more stuff. We had to sort of work around some scheduling challenges this season, but we made it. And a lot of draft coverage going to be coming up the next 2.5 months, leading into the lottery, after the lottery. And it'll be fun to sort of talk through some more of these prospects, including probably two of the guys that you and I just spoke about for the last 90 minutes with Knueppel and Maluach. Which is say, please listen and subscribe there. And yes, the Substack, like I'm really trying to push that as much as possible. So people who want to get emails with basketball information into their inbox, you know, once, twice a week, please subscribe. I'm having a lot of fun doing that. And I'm very vain. So seeing the subscriber numbers go up also is appreciated. So yeah, follow me along there and just excited. This is becoming like one of my favorite times of the year. Like
Yeah.
Scouting for the transfer portal, scouting for the draft, and watching the NBA playoffs is like a delightful combination. So looking forward to the next 2 months, 2.5 months here.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you all very much for listening. This is Chucking Darts. It is okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you.